Now let's turn this discussion over to community relations. I have mentioned before that where this discussion has ended up is very troubling. However, this is no one's fault other than the Waco PD's communication method. Within the previous parts of this exercise, I have cited both civilian and military doctrine that preaches the avoidance of any sort of bias. And I've pointed out that in the information world, bias doesn't have to be clear-cut. It only has to be perceived to have an undesirable effect upon one's organizational brand. I cited a Baylor University study that showed that over half of the African Americans in Waco perceived a bias against them by the Waco PD's operations. I also demonstrated a bias that the Waco PD had whenever they broke their steadfast rule of publishing mugshots on their Facebook account whenever the newsworthy arrest, involved one of their police officers. I also demonstrated how the word choices made by the Waco PD public information officer plus the cookie cutter arrest of 200 bikers jailed while the civilians, quote, civilians, were let go, which also demonstrates a clear bias towards a certain group. I also demonstrated how the blame the restaurant was a scapegoat used by the Waco PD's public information efforts. Or was it a scapegoat at all? Or was it a bias against Twin Peaks and in favor of Twin Peaks' restaurant competition, who would have loved to see their competition go away? Because in the aftermath, the Twin Peaks restaurant would be completely destroyed and taken out of the competitor's market. Most of these are very clear biases demonstrated by evidence. A small portion is a perceived bias, but as we said, in the information world, those things don't matter. So based upon this evidence of clear bias and a shade of perceived, the Waco citizens have to wonder if they are a part of the group that is biased for or against. A lot of these biases are based upon organizational mythologies. The mugshot situation is based upon a mythology that all cops are good. The words of the public information officer where he convicted 200 individuals of organized crime is based upon the mythology that all bikers are bad. And the blame Twin Peaks for the incident is based upon an organizational mythology that citizens and people in restaurants should just listen to the police and follow them without question, whether or not they are right or wrong, or whether or not they have any evidence to support, or whether or not they do their job in communicating clearly with the public. The mythology is that people should just do what the police say without question. One of these evidences of bias that I presented so far was not evidenced by a demonstration of a mythology. One of these evidence of biases is based upon mathematical scientific study, which has its own merit. And since a perceived bias by African American Wacoans exist, and these other mythologies exist, it's not a stretch to believe that there's another mythology that I've yet to mention. Evidence by mathematics. And I asked this question once before when I presented the graph and the elephant in the room. Is the Waco Police Department biased on racial terms? While I said earlier that we've ended up in a troubling place, but I also said that no one is to blame but the methods that the Waco PD has chosen to interact in the information world. They created the perceived biases through their methods, and they will have to answer for them. And the recommendation for the Waco Police Department as related to community relations is do the research, construct policy based upon military and civilian doctrines and ethics. And I'm very confident that once they do this research, they will be able to soon realize that their community relation policy, which seems to simply involve taking plenty of pictures with police officers and kids, it will become evident to them that there is a lot more to it than that.